Amara was a young woman from the small town of Ibok. She was known for her quiet nature and her love for designing clothes. Ever since she was a little girl, she would cut old fabric and sew tiny dresses for dolls. She dreamed of becoming a famous fashion designer, but people never took her seriously. Her aunt, who raised her after her parents died, always said, "Amara, stop wasting time with that needle and thread. Go find real work." Her friends laughed whenever she talked about fashion. They said she was dreaming too big for a poor girl. Even her boyfriend, Toby, who once said he believed in her, changed with time. When a rich girl started showing interest in him, he left Amara without a second thought. Amara felt the sting of rejection from everyone she trusted. She would cry at night, wondering if they were right. But deep inside, something kept telling her not to give up. One morning, she packed her small bag and left Ibok for the city. She didn't know anyone there, but she was ready to start a new life. In the city, life was not easy. Amara found work as a cleaner in a tailor's shop. The shop owner, Madame Ronk, was strict and never smiled. Amara swept the floor, washed clothes, and ironed dresses for little pay. Yet every night, when the shop was quiet, she would sit in a corner and watch how the tailors cut and stitched fabric. She studied their movements and learned by observing. She used pieces of old cloth to practice sewing when everyone left. Sometimes she pricked her fingers, sometimes the thread broke, but she kept trying. Months passed, and Amara began to get better. She started designing small clothes for children in the neighborhood. The mothers liked her simple designs, and slowly, she began earning a little extra. Though life was still hard, she was proud of herself. One day, a customer named Mr. Depo came into the shop. He was kind and friendly. While waiting for his clothes, he saw Amara repairing a torn dress. He noticed the neatness of her stitches and asked who taught her. When she said she learned by watching others, he was impressed. Mr. Depo told her about a small fashion contest happening in the city. He encouraged her to join. At first, Amara laughed. She said, "Sir, I have no money, no machine, not even good fabric." But Mr. Depo smiled and said, "You have skill, and that is more important." His words gave her courage. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She thought about the contest and the people who once laughed at her. She decided to try. The next morning, she collected leftover fabric from Madame Ronk's waste bin. She cleaned them carefully and joined the pieces together. She worked every night after cleaning duties, sewing by candlelight. Her fingers ached, her back hurt, but she refused to stop. When she finished the dress, it looked like something from a dream. The day of the contest came. Many designers brought beautiful clothes made from expensive fabric. Amara felt small among them, wearing her old sandals and carrying her dress in a nylon bag. Some contestants whispered and laughed at her. But when it was her turn to show her work, the hall went silent. Her dress, made from small scraps of fabric, looked unique and colorful. It told a story of struggle and beauty. When the judges announced the results, Amara stood frozen. Her name was called as the winner. She couldn't believe it. Tears rolled down her face as the crowd clapped. Reporters took her picture and asked about her journey. She told them, "I was rejected, but I never stopped believing in myself." The next morning, her photo was in the newspaper with the headline, "Cleaner turns fashion star." News of her victory spread quickly, even to her hometown. Her aunt saw the picture and cried. Her friends couldn't believe their eyes. And Toby, the boyfriend who left her, told people proudly that he once dated her. Amara laughed when she heard it. She had no anger in her heart. She just kept moving forward. With the prize money from the contest, Amara opened a small shop in the city. She named it Dream Stitch Designs. Customers came from far and near because her clothes were creative and full of meaning. She started training young girls for free, especially those who had been told they were not good enough. Her business grew fast, and soon she became known as one of the best designers in the region. Years later, Amara returned to Ibok. This time, she came in a car with her name written on it. The same people who once mocked her ran to greet her. Her aunt hugged her tightly and said, "I was wrong, my child. You proved us all wrong." Amara smiled and said, "Auntie, if you had not pushed me away, maybe I would not have gone this far. Everything worked for my good." Toby came to visit her shop too. He tried to act confident, but his eyes showed regret. He told her, "Amara, I am proud of you. You have become the woman I always knew you could be." She smiled and replied kindly, "Thank you, Toby. I hope you are doing well." That was all she said. There was no anger, no revenge, only peace. Later that year, Amara built a fashion school in her hometown. She called it the Hope Academy. On the day it opened, the whole town came to celebrate. She wore a simple white dress and stood before the crowd to speak. She said, "When people reject you, don't let it stop you. Use it as a reason to grow. Sometimes rejection is not the end, it is the road to your true beginning." Her words touched everyone deeply. The mayor gave a speech about her, calling her an inspiration to young women across the region. The girls in the audience looked at her with bright eyes, dreaming of becoming like her one day. Her aunt sat in the front row, wiping her tears proudly. Even Toby was there, clapping softly with regret written all over his face. That night, Amara stood alone outside her school, watching the stars. She remembered the nights she slept hungry, the days she cried in secret, and the times she almost gave up. But she was grateful for every moment. If those people hadn't rejected her, she might never have found her strength. She realized that sometimes, rejection is just another form of direction. The next morning, she opened the school gates herself and welcomed her first group of students. She smiled as she said, "You don't need to be rich to start. You just need to believe." The girls clapped, and their laughter filled the air. Amara felt complete at last. She had turned pain into power, rejection into redirection, and dreams into destiny. Years later, her name became known across the country. Fashion magazines wrote about her designs, and television shows invited her for interviews. But she never forgot where she came from. Whenever people asked about her success, she always said, "They rejected me, and I thank them for it. Because their rejection became my reason to rise." The town of Ibok never forgot her story. Whenever young people faced failure, their parents would say, "Remember Amara, the girl they rejected, and lived to regret it." Amara left her hometown with only a small bag, a few coins, and a heart full of pain. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay in Ibok any longer. The whispers, the laughter, and the rejection had become too heavy to bear. Her dreams were too big for the small town that refused to believe in her. As the bus rolled down the dusty road, she looked out the window and whispered, "One day, they will see." When she arrived in the city, everything felt strange. The streets were full of people rushing everywhere, and tall buildings blocked the sun. Amara felt small in the crowd, but she told herself that even a small seed can grow into a tall tree. She spent her first few nights sleeping in a small church shelter. The caretaker, a kind old woman named Mama Eka, gave her bread and water. "You are young," Mama Eka said softly. "Find work, and start small. God will help you grow." The next week, Amara walked from street to street, looking for a job. Many people turned her away, saying she had no experience. Some didn't even listen to her. Just when she was about to give up, she saw a tailor's shop with a sign that said, "Cleaner needed." Her heart beat fast. She stepped inside and met Madame Ronk, the owner, a large woman with sharp eyes and a loud voice. "You can clean?" Madame Ronk asked. "Yes, ma," Amara replied quickly. "You will sweep, wash, iron, and run errands. You will come early and leave late. Pay is small. If you agree, start tomorrow." Amara nodded at once. It didn't matter if the pay was small. What mattered was that she had a chance to be close to sewing machines, fabrics, and people who made clothes. That night, she thanked God for the opportunity. Her first days were hard. The shop opened early, and she had to sweep before the first customer arrived. The other workers barely noticed her. They were busy measuring, cutting, and stitching. Amara cleaned quietly, but her eyes followed every movement. She watched how they folded fabric, how they used the machine, and how they joined pieces together. Every night, she replayed what she saw in her mind. When everyone went home, Amara would stay behind for a few minutes. She would collect small leftover fabric from the floor and practice with a broken needle and thread she carried in her pocket. Her hands shook at first, and her stitches were uneven, but she kept trying. She pricked her fingers many times, and sometimes her eyes filled with tears, but she whispered to herself, "I will learn. I will not stop. Months went by, and Amara became part of the shop. The tailors began to notice her neatness and quiet strength. Madame Ronk trusted her with small tasks like folding fabric and organizing patterns. Amara did everything with care. She didn't complain, even when she was tired or hungry. Sometimes, when she saw beautiful dresses leave the shop, she would smile and think, "One day, I'll make something like that." Life in the city was still not easy. Her small room leaked when it rained. She cooked plain rice most nights and saved every coin she could. There were days she cried in silence, missing home and wondering if she had made a mistake. But each time doubt came, she remembered the laughter of her friends and the cold eyes of her aunt. Their rejection gave her strength. "I must make something of myself," she said to herself every morning before leaving for work. One evening, when the shop was almost empty, Amara sat quietly at the back, mending a torn dress that had been left on a chair. The dress belonged to a customer who was supposed to collect it the next day. She noticed a loose thread and wanted to fix it neatly. Her fingers moved with care, and though she had no training, her stitches were firm and clean. A man walked in just then, tall, wearing glasses, and holding a paper bag. He had come to collect his clothes. His name was Mr. Depot. He stopped when he saw Amara bent over the fabric. "Who made those stitches?" he asked. Amara looked up, frightened, thinking she had done something wrong. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly. "I was only helping. I didn't mean to spoil it." Mr. Depot smiled kindly. "No, my dear," he said. "You didn't spoil it. These stitches are neat. Who taught you?" "No one, sir," Amara said shyly. "I just watch the others when I finish cleaning." He looked surprised. "You learned by watching?" Amara nodded. "Yes, sir. I love sewing, but I haven't gone to any school for it." Mr. Depot placed the dress on the table and said gently, "You have a gift. Don't hide it. You should use it." Those words sank deep into Amara's heart. No one had ever said something so kind to her before. That night, she could not sleep. She kept hearing his words, "You have a gift. Don't hide it." She thought about how everyone in her hometown had told her the opposite. They said she was wasting her time, that sewing would never take her anywhere. But here, a stranger had seen something special in her. The next day, Amara worked with new energy. She cleaned faster so she could have a few minutes to practice stitching before going home. Every small improvement made her heart dance. Madame Ronk noticed that Amara was becoming more confident and allowed her to help with simple repairs. Her fellow workers began to ask her for help when they were busy. Slowly, she was no longer just a cleaner. She was learning to be a tailor. Still, not every day was easy. One afternoon, a worker accused her of spoiling a customer's dress, even though it wasn't her fault. Madame Ronk shouted at her, and Amara cried all the way home. She thought about quitting, but the next morning, she came back. She told herself that storms never last forever. When Mr. Depot came again a few weeks later, he noticed that Amara looked tired. He asked, "Why do you look sad, my dear?" She smiled weakly and said, "It's nothing, sir. I'm just trying to do my best." He nodded and said, "Keep trying. Every great person started small. One day, your story will shine." Those words gave her new strength. That night, Amara worked on a small piece of fabric she had saved. She joined different colors together and made a simple but beautiful design. When she looked at it, she felt proud. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Weeks turned into months. Customers began to notice her neat handwork. One woman told Madame Ronk, "Whoever fixed my dress did it beautifully." Madame Ronk looked surprised but said nothing. Later, she told Amara quietly, "You have good hands. Keep it up." Those simple words meant more to Amara than gold. Every night, she still practiced with broken needles and torn fabric. Her dreams began to grow stronger than her fears. She no longer thought about what she had lost. She thought about what she was building. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she imagined a small shop with her name on the door. She imagined teaching other girls who were told they could never make it. And in those dreams, she saw the faces of everyone who had rejected her, her aunt, her friends, even Toby, watching her with surprise and regret. But Amara didn't dream of revenge. She only dreamed of success, peace, and purpose. The road was lonely, yes, but it was also shaping her into someone strong, someone unbreakable. Every insult she had once heard had turned into a reason to keep moving. Every rejection had become her teacher. And deep in her heart, she knew that her story was only beginning. Amara stood behind the counter of the tailor's shop, folding pieces of fabric neatly when Mr. Depot walked in again. It had been several weeks since he last saw her. This time, he carried a flyer in his hand. He smiled warmly and said, "Amara, there's something I want to show you." She wiped her hands and took the paper from him carefully. It was an announcement for a small fashion contest in the city. The words read, "Young talents in fashion, create something beautiful from simple materials." Amara stared at it for a long time. Her heart began to beat faster. "A contest," she whispered. "Sir, I don't think I can do this. I'm just a cleaner." Mr. Depot shook his head and said gently, "You're more than that, Amara. You have skill, and this contest is made for people like you. They want creativity, not money or fame. You should try." Amara looked down. "But I have no fine fabric, no machine, not even good scissors. What will I use?" Mr. Depot smiled again. "Use what you have. Use your hands and your heart. That's enough." Those words stayed in Amara's mind all day. Even while sweeping and ironing, she kept thinking about the contest. Could she really do it? That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay on her small bed and imagined herself sewing a beautiful dress. But fear whispered in her ear, "You will fail. You are not good enough." She turned to the wall and closed her eyes, but another voice inside her said, "Try. Just try." The next morning, before going to work, Amara stopped by a small market. She bought a needle, some thread, and a few buttons with the little money she had saved. When she reached the shop, she began collecting leftover fabric from the floor and bins. Madame Ronk didn't mind. She always threw scraps away. Amara carefully folded each piece, blue, yellow, red, green, thinking she might use them all to make something colorful. That night, after everyone left, she stayed behind. She joined the pieces together, one stitch at a time. Her fingers were slow but steady. The candlelight flickered as she worked. Sometimes she hummed softly to keep herself awake. It took her 3 nights to finish the design. The dress wasn't made from new fabric, but it had beauty in its colors and soul in its design. When she held it up, she smiled. "This," she whispered, "is my chance." The day of the contest arrived. Amara woke up before sunrise. She wrapped the dress carefully in a plastic bag and wore her cleanest outfit, a faded white blouse and a long skirt. On the way to the contest hall, her heart raced so fast she could hear it. The hall was big and full of bright lights. Many contestants were already there, setting up their designs. Their dresses looked elegant, made with fine fabric and perfect stitches. Some people looked at Amara's bag and laughed quietly. "She brought her dress in a nylon bag," one of them whispered. Amara heard them, but she didn't respond. She just held her bag tighter. When it was time to display the designs, Amara placed her dress on the mannequin she borrowed from the shop. For a moment, she stood still, unsure if she should even be there. Then she remembered Mr. Depot's words, "Use your hands and your heart." She lifted her head high and smiled. The judges walked around the hall, examining each design carefully. When they reached Amara's corner, one of them raised an eyebrow. "This looks different," he said softly. Another judge, a woman in a bright blue head wrap, touched the fabric and smiled. "These are scraps, aren't they?" she asked. "Yes, ma," Amara replied quietly. "Leftover fabric from a tailor's shop." The woman nodded with admiration. "But you turned them into something beautiful. This is real creativity." The judges moved on, but Amara could see they were talking about her dress. She didn't know whether it was good or bad. Her heart beat so loudly she could hardly hear the music in the hall. Hours passed as they reviewed all the entries. Finally, everyone gathered to hear the results. One of the judges walked to the stage with a microphone. "We saw many wonderful designs today," he began. "But one design stood out because it showed that beauty can come from anything, even from what others throw away." He paused, smiling. "The winner is Amara Ease." Amara froze. For a second, she thought she had misheard. Then the crowd began to clap. People turned to look at her, smiling. Someone shouted, "Go on, that's you." Her hands trembled as she walked to the stage. Tears filled her eyes as she accepted the certificate and the small trophy. She couldn't believe it. The man with the microphone said, "Congratulations, young lady. You've also won a scholarship to train with one of the best fashion houses in the city." The room exploded with cheers. Flashlights from cameras flickered around her. A reporter came forward and asked, "Can you tell us your story?" Amara wiped her tears and said softly, "I used to be a cleaner in a tailor's shop. I learned by watching others. I didn't have good fabric or tools, but I had a dream. I just wanted to make something beautiful." The next day, her picture was in the newspaper with the headline, "Cleaner Wins Fashion Contest with Scrap Dress." People who read it were amazed. Her aunt back in Ibok nearly dropped her tea when she saw Amara's face on the front page. "This can't be my Amara," she whispered, but it was. Her friends who once laughed at her began to tell everyone they knew her. Even Toby, the boyfriend who left her, told people proudly, "I always said she had talent." But deep inside, he felt regret. At the shop, Madame Ronk also saw the news. She didn't show much emotion, but when Amara arrived that morning, she simply said, "Congratulations. I knew you were watching us closely." For the first time, Madame Ronk smiled. Amara's life began to change. The fashion house that offered her training was run by a famous designer named Madame Amina. On her first day there, Amara was nervous. The machines were bigger, the fabrics finer, and everyone moved quickly. But Madame Amina took her under her wing and said, "You have raw talent, my dear. You remind me of myself when I started." Under her guidance, Amara learned to design with confidence. She worked long hours, sketching, cutting, and stitching until her skills shone brighter every day. She no longer felt like the cleaner who once worked in the shadows. She was now becoming the designer she had always dreamed of being. One afternoon, during a fashion show hosted by the company, Madame Amina called her on stage. "This young woman," she said proudly, "started with nothing but a dream. Today, she is one of our brightest stars." The audience clapped loudly. Amara smiled through tears. She thought about Mr. Depot, about the scraps of fabric, and about the long nights she spent sewing by candlelight. After the show, she stepped outside and looked at the city lights. The same city that once felt cold and strange now felt like home. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Thank you, God. Thank you for giving me strength." That night, as she walked home, people stopped her on the street. Some recognized her from the newspaper. Others congratulated her without knowing who she was. Amara smiled humbly at everyone. She knew her journey was just beginning. Back in Ibok, the story of Amara spread like wildfire. Mothers told their daughters about her, saying, "Work hard like Amara. Never give up." Her aunt began keeping Amara's newspaper photo in her living room, showing it proudly to visitors. The same people who once called her foolish now spoke her name with pride. Amara didn't hold grudges. After many years in the city, Amara had built the life she once dreamed of. She owned her own fashion brand called Amara's Touch, and her designs were loved by people everywhere. Her shop was full of colors, laughter, and the soft sound of sewing machines. She had a team of workers who respected her, and a group of young girls she was training to become tailors and designers. Whenever she looked at them, she saw herself, the girl who once swept floors, picked up fabric scraps, and sewed under candlelight. Her success didn't happen overnight. It took years of hard work, patience, and faith. Sometimes things went wrong, orders got delayed, or machines broke down. But Amara never gave up. She remembered the days when she had nothing and smiled at how far she had come. Every morning, she started her day with a quiet prayer, whispering, "Thank you, God. You turned my pain into purpose." One sunny morning, Amara received a letter. It was an invitation from the Women's Association in her hometown, Ibok. They wanted to honor her for being a daughter of the soil who had made the town proud. At first, she sat quietly, holding the letter in her hands. Memories of her past came flooding back, the laughter, the rejection, the tears. She had left that town with nothing but a small bag and a broken heart. And now, they wanted to celebrate her. That night, she stood by her window, watching the city lights. She thought of her aunt, her old friends, and even Toby, the boyfriend who left her for a rich girl. She smiled softly. Maybe it's time, she said to herself. Maybe it's time to go home. A week later, she packed her suitcase and drove back to Ibok. The road felt familiar but different. The same trees lined the way, but she was no longer the scared girl who once ran away. She was a woman now, confident, successful, and at peace. As her car rolled into the town, people began to notice. Children waved, and old neighbors pointed. "Is that Amara?" someone whispered. "The same Amara who used to dream about sewing?" She parked in front of her aunt's house, the same old clay house with a small wooden door. Her aunt came out slowly, holding her walking stick. When she saw Amara, her eyes filled with tears. "My child," she said, her voice shaking. "You came back." Amara hugged her gently. "Yes, Auntie. I came home." Her aunt held her face in her hands. "Look at you. You look like a queen. You made me proud." Amara smiled. "You made me strong," she said softly. News of her return spread through the whole town. People began to visit the house. Old friends, neighbors, even people who once mocked her. They brought food, drinks, and too many smiles. Some came out of real happiness, and others came out of curiosity. Everyone wanted to see the girl who had become a star. Among the visitors was her old friend, Chica. Back in the day, Chica used to laugh at Amara's dreams, saying she was wasting her time with needles and thread. Now, she arrived wearing a borrowed dress and carrying a wide smile. "Amara," she said loudly, hugging her as if they had always been close. "You haven't changed at all. I knew you would make it one day." Amara smiled politely. "Thank you, Chica. It's good to see you again." Then came another visitor, Toby. When Amara saw him standing at the gate, her heart didn't race like it used to. He looked older now. The glow he once had was gone. Life had not been kind to him. The rich girl he left Amara for had left him after a few years, and his business had failed. Still, he walked in with the same confident smile. "Amara," he said softly, almost nervously. "It's been a long time." "Yes, it has," she replied calmly. He looked at her dress, elegant but simple, and said, "You look amazing. I always knew you'd make it. I used to tell people you were different." Amara laughed gently, not in pride but in peace. "Thank you, Toby," she said. "I hope life has been good to you." Toby looked away for a moment, embarrassed. "It's been fine," he said quietly. "But you've done well. I'm proud of you." Amara nodded kindly. "We all find our paths," she said. "Some take longer than others." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Toby smiled sadly and said, "I wish I had believed in you back then." Amara smiled back. "It's okay. Maybe if you had, I wouldn't have fought this hard. Rejection taught me how to stand." He looked down, unable to respond. Amara didn't mean it harshly, she simply spoke the truth. Later that evening, the Women's Association held a small ceremony in her honor. The hall was filled with people, music, and the sweet smell of food. Children danced while the drummers played softly in the background. Amara sat at the front, surrounded by bright fabrics and smiling faces. When it was time to speak, she stood up slowly, her voice calm and clear. "I left this town many years ago," she began. "When I left, I had no money, no friends, and no hope. But I had one thing, a dream. That dream gave me strength when people laughed at me. That dream gave me light when everything felt dark. And today, I want to say thank you, even to those who rejected me. Because your rejection pushed me to find my strength." The crowd clapped. Her aunt wiped her eyes with the edge of her wrapper. Even Toby, standing at the back, nodded slowly, his face full of regret. Amara continued, "I came back not just to celebrate, but to give back. I have built a small training school for young girls here in Ibok. I want every girl who feels small or ignored to know that she can rise. You don't need to be rich or powerful. You just need to believe in yourself." Everyone stood and applauded. Some shouted her name, others sang her praise. The local chief came forward and handed her a small plaque, calling her the pride of Ibok. After the ceremony, people gathered around to take pictures with her. Some begged her for advice, others asked for help. Amara listened to everyone patiently. She didn't look down on anyone. She smiled, hugged them, and encouraged them. She remembered how lonely she once was and didn't want anyone else to feel that way. As the night grew quiet, Amara sat outside under the moonlight, watching the stars. Her aunt came out and sat beside her. "You see, my child," her aunt said, "those who laughed at you now wish they could be you." Amara smiled. "It's not about that, Auntie. I'm just happy I didn't stop. If I had given up, I wouldn't be here." Her aunt nodded. "You have a good heart. That's why God lifted you." Amara leaned her head on her aunt's shoulder. She could hear the soft music still playing from the hall, and the sound of crickets filled the night. Everything felt peaceful. The next morning, as she prepared to return to the city, children ran after her car, waving and shouting, "Bye, Auntie Amara! Come back soon." She waved back, smiling through her tears. As the car drove away, she looked at the town disappearing behind her and whispered, "I forgive you all." There was no anger in her heart, only gratitude. The people who once rejected her had given her the push she needed to become who she was. And though the tables had turned, Amara didn't feel like she had won a battle. She simply felt free. She wasn't bitter anymore. She was better, wiser, and full of peace. The day of the school's opening was bright and full of life. The sun shone gently over Ibok town, and the air smelled of fresh flowers and new beginnings. Amara stood outside the new building, a clean, painted structure with wide windows and a sign that read, "The Amara Skills and Fashion Academy." Children laughed as they ran around the compound, holding ribbons and balloons. Women from the market came in colorful wrappers, and men from the community sat under canopies, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Amara looked around and took a deep breath. Her heart was full. She could still remember the first day she arrived in this town as a cleaner, tired and broken. Now she stood before her people as a woman who had turned pain into purpose. She smiled softly as she watched her students, young girls between the ages of 10 and 18, wearing uniforms she had designed herself. Each of them looked happy, hopeful, and proud. Inside the hall, guests were already seated. Her aunt sat in the front row, wearing a bright blue head tie. Mr. Dapo had traveled all the way from the city to attend the ceremony. He sat beside her aunt, smiling proudly. A group of journalists from the local radio station was also there, setting up their microphones and cameras. Amara walked slowly to the front, her white dress flowing gently as she moved. The crowd stood up and clapped. The sound filled the air, and for a moment, Amara felt tears in her eyes. She remembered the laughter, the insults, the rejection, and how every moment of pain had led her to this one. When the applause died down, she stepped up to the small stage. A microphone stood in front of her, and the banner behind her read, "Empowering Girls, Building Dreams." She took a deep breath and began to speak in her calm, gentle voice. "My people," she said, smiling warmly, "I thank God for this day. Many years ago, I walked through this town with nothing but hope. Some of you remember me, the girl who wanted to be a tailor, the girl who was laughed at, the girl who left this town with tears in her eyes." The crowd was silent. Even the children stopped playing. Amara continued, "When I left Ibok, I thought rejection was the end of my story. I thought God had forgotten me. But I was wrong. The truth is, sometimes rejection is not a curse, it is a direction. It pushes you to find your true path." People nodded. Some whispered to each other. A few women in the front row wiped their eyes. Amara smiled and went on. "If you ever feel rejected, don't cry too long. Don't stop believing in yourself. Sometimes, when people turn away from you, it is because God wants you to walk alone, so you can discover your own strength." The crowd clapped. Her aunt smiled proudly, and Mr. Dapo nodded with tears in his eyes. Amara turned toward the girls seated in front. "My daughters," she said gently, "this school is for you. You may not have rich parents or fancy clothes, but you have something greater, your hands, your mind, and your dreams. Use them well. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't rise." The girls clapped excitedly. Some of them stood and waved at her, shouting, "Thank you, Auntie Amara." Amara laughed and waved back. "You are welcome, my children. But remember, the best thank you you can give me is to become strong, kind, and wise." Then she turned back to the guests and said, "Many people think success is about money or fame. But real success is about peace. It is about helping others rise. That is why I built this school, to give hope where I once had none." She paused for a moment and looked at the crowd. Among them, she saw Toby standing quietly near the back. He looked humble and a little ashamed. Their eyes met briefly, and she smiled kindly at him before looking away. She had no anger in her heart anymore. She had forgiven him long ago. "The lesson I learned," she said softly, "is that rejection doesn't define you, your response to it does. When people said I was not good enough, I worked harder. When they said I would fail, I prayed and tried again. That is what made the difference." Her words sank deep into the hearts of everyone present. Even those who once mocked her now felt proud, inspired, and humbled. After her speech, the ribbon-cutting ceremony began. Amara took the scissors, and with her aunt and Mr. Dapo beside her, she cut the bright red ribbon. The crowd cheered, and music filled the air. Drummers beat their drums, women danced, and the children sang songs of joy. Inside the school, the guests walked around, admiring the sewing machines, fabric shelves, and neat classrooms. Each room had a quote on the wall, painted in bright colors. One of them said, "Your dreams are valid." Another read, "Work hard, stay kind." As the guests moved around, Amara sat quietly for a moment in her small office. On the wall behind her desk hung a framed picture, her first design, the dress that had won her the fashion contest. She smiled at it and whispered, "We made it." Her aunt entered the office and placed her hand on Amara's shoulder. "You have done well, my child," she said softly. "Look how far you've come." Amara held her aunt's hand and replied, "I couldn't have done it without your prayers. You were the only one who believed in me." Her aunt laughed gently. "Even when others didn't, I knew you would shine." They both sat quietly, watching the happy crowd outside through the window. Later that evening, as the sun set over Ibok, the celebration continued. Children danced, and people shared food and laughter. Amara walked around greeting everyone, shaking hands, and taking pictures. Everywhere she went, people thanked her for giving hope to the town. Toby approached her once more, this time with a humble look. "Amara," he said softly, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I was foolish back then." Amara smiled kindly. "It's all in the past, Toby. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." He nodded slowly. "You've become an amazing woman. I'm happy for you." "Thank you," she replied. "I wish you peace." They both smiled, and Toby walked away, lighter than before. As night fell, the last guests left, and Amara stood alone outside the school gate. The moon shone brightly, and the air was quiet except for the sound of crickets. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for every no that led me to this yes." In that quiet moment, she realized that every tear, every insult, and every lonely night had been part of her journey. The rejection she once hated had become her greatest teacher. From that day, her school became a light in the community. Young girls from all over came to learn not only sewing but also courage, self-worth, and faith. Many of them later opened their own small shops, lifting their families out of poverty. They often said, "Auntie Amara taught us not to give up." Years later, when people spoke of Amara in Ibok, they didn't just call her a fashion designer. They called her the woman who turned rejection into light. Her story became a lesson for everyone, that sometimes, being rejected is the first step toward being redirected. And in the heart of Ibok, the little girl they once mocked had become a symbol of hope, kindness, and grace. She had been rejected, but she rose higher than they ever imagined. She was no longer just Amara the tailor. She was a